Joining us now is Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com. That is thenationalpulse.com. Raheem, great to see you. Raheem, it's with great confusion that we are looking at what's happening with Russia and Ukraine. President Donald Trump issued a statement and also said on a press gaggle before boarding Air Force One that he's not happy with Putin, saying something has gone wrong with Putin, that Putin is launching missiles into cities in the midst of peace negotiations. What's going on here?
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. Thank you for having me. A story that somehow became very close to my heart since I was in the Maidan Square during the revolution in the latter days of 2013 and early 2014, and looking, down the pipeline at everything that could have happened there. Talking about the necessity, really, of a war, a hot war, given the EU's expansionism, given NATO's expansionism, and obviously now we're talking about Vladimir Putin, given his this inability that he finds himself in now to row back from this war. I think we need to go back about 10 days, I think it was, when the vice president was in a gaggle on a plane with reporters, and he said, look, the problem with Putin, the problem Putin has right now is he doesn't actually know how to sell peace. He doesn't actually know how to get out of this amongst his own people. And those are, the people are immediately around him, the generals, the oligarchs. But it's also the Russian people. What does he take to the Russian people now and say that he extracted, that he won from all of this process? And increasingly, as we look at him aging, increasingly as we look at how he is considering this to be perhaps a legacy that he didn't want, a stalemate in Eastern Europe, how does he sell a peace? Now, President Trump has tried, peace for the sake of peace, but now you can see that the tone is shifting. And there are two tacks that he's taking. They're very familiar to people who know President Trump. But obviously it leaves the mainstream media scratching its heads because they never listen to him anyway. So the two tacks are this: what we saw this weekend, which is the volley fire of rhetoric to say, hey, sharpen up, we need you at the table, you need to be at the table, what have you done, lost your mind? And then the other one is the carrot, right, which is the economic exposure. Welcome back to the G8. We'll have you at all the conferences. We can move past this. We can invest in Russia and have Russia invest in the Western world again. And that is something that we're seeing now, I guess, in the last 7 days, that has now become the tactic for the Trump administration. It's certainly been a longer and a harder slog towards peace than I think almost everyone had hoped. But we can still see that there are weapons in the arsenal of peace here.
So I have several thoughts here. Number one, what is Russia and Putin's calculus here? Why are they bombing cities in the midst of these peace negotiations? And do you think Russia wants an end to this war?
I'll take the second question first, if you don't mind. I think yes, and I think yes because the war hasn't extracted for Russia what it necessarily wanted. They didn't go far enough, I think they would say, in the early days of the war. They failed to secure the capital. They failed to decapitate the leader of the government there at the time, and so this slow trudge hasn't really worked out the way they wanted it to work out. Look, I think, when you look at the number of lives lost, the amount of money it's cost, there's nothing really that you can take back. And Zelensky has this problem too, by the way. There's nothing really that either of those leaders can take back to their public and say, look, we achieved this, that, and the other for all of this blood that's been shed and for all the money that we've spent on this and for the livelihood that you have lost in the time being. Right, there isn't that, and so it's this weird logjam, which brings me on to the first part of your question, which is we are actually probably at the most dangerous part of the war since it started, because neither of these two men want to give up any face. Neither of those two armies want to be the first to be seen to back down, but also they recognize that without bearing further teeth, they can expect no further concessions. My analysis of it is there will be no further concessions. Where you land now is where you land after any given peace deal. I would counsel both of them to just get their pens on paper.
And so that's the first thing. So the second part is that, is there any appetite within the Trump White House or the broader, let's say, Republican coalition to continue sending armaments to Ukraine if Russia wants to continue brokering this war?
Yes, there is, and an increasing one at that as well. And I say that as somebody who fundamentally opposed involvement from the outset. I can see on Capitol Hill, I can see within the defense establishment now them sort of, even coming around to a more, I dare say it, Biden-esque approach to dealing with this thing, which is throwing more money and resources after it. It's not their preferred route right now. The preferred route right now, actually, we'll see the fruits of in the next couple of days. What's going to happen in the next couple of days is European nations are going to decide and announce whether or not they're increasing their percentage share of GDP into the NATO budget. Remember, it had typically been 2%. Just about nobody was reaching that in the first instance. Trump comes along in 2016. About half of NATO members go, okay, we're going to do it. About half of the half ended up doing it. Now President Trump has been talking about upping that to 5%. And the rumor mill is such that across Europe, a lot of these governments now are about to say, you know what? Yes, it's high time we do this and announce an increase to 5% GDP spending for defense. That will be, it sounds like a bureaucratic change. It will actually be somewhat of a sea change, not just for the way that Europeans regard their own defense spending, but actually how external adversaries to Europe, especially Russia, perceive European military capabilities. So that is coming in the next few days. We think we'll see how that goes, because that could change a lot.
There's a lot of talk about what's happening in Israel right now. Hostages being released, terrorists resurfacing, Gaza plans, and so on. But there's one thing we tend to overlook: the people of Israel. The war has taken a huge physical and emotional toll on the Jewish people. And that's why I want you to know about the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. And I want you to support the important work they do. IFCJ is on the ground throughout Israel, providing food and life-saving aid to the sick and elderly, even released hostages and their families. Join with me and visit ifcj.org/learn more. And so just kind of one final question then is, what if we then start sending more armaments to Ukraine? How do we reconcile that with a lot of our position, which is that we have no business in this war? We've said this for quite a while. I suppose Russia, if they're willing to keep on sacrificing so many of their citizens, do they think they have the West over the barrel because we don't have the might or the fortitude to continue this war?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the role of a global hegemon, whether you like it and accept it or not, doesn't necessarily mean you have a part of every war, but it certainly means you have a part of every peace that is negotiated around the world. I mean, whether it is India and Pakistan, whether it is in Eastern Europe, people will look to the global hegemon for guidance, leadership, and underwriting of any peace deal that is put together. So I take your point entirely. I feel exactly the same way. I don't feel that even my country, the United Kingdom, necessarily has a role to play in that war, in that climate. But we have to also remember that it was a lot of European actors, a lot of American actors that led Ukraine into a position where it had no nuclear deterrent, led Ukraine into a position where it thought it was going to be rolled the red carpet out to join NATO and the European Union. And when those promises didn't come true, and not that I'm saying they should have come true, but necessarily when they didn't come true, this war broke out as a result. And you had a number of leaders that were replaced there, again, European and American efforts. So, yeah, we don't want to be a part of this, but unfortunately, we're tidying up the messes made by the Obama-Biden administration and indeed the previous leadership of the European Union. I think I said it at the beginning of this administration. Back in January, I said, look, if they don't have a peace settlement on the cards by summer, something drastic is going to change.
Yeah, and again, the big fear here is how can you broker peace if one of the sides do not want peace? And if Russia really does not want to have peace and they're willing to keep on throwing hundreds of thousands of their own young men as just a meat grinder, then the question is, what do we in the West actually do? And reconciling that with the question of what is the domestic appetite in America. About 1 minute remaining, Raheem. Does Russia really want all of Ukraine?
I think the prevailing consensus within Russia's military establishment and political establishment would say yes. I don't think public sentiment in Russia tracks the same way. This is what I mean when I talk about how, Putin is looking at a legacy at this point. He knows he's not going to be in power probably in 5 to 10 years' time. And he probably knows that the country is going in a very different direction after he leaves office. So can he bring the Russian people to him on this issue? I don't think he can, in which case I think he is literally just clinging on to a losing battle here now.
So, Raheem, when I was in Cambridge, a professor came up and was honestly on the pro-Ukraine side, and he thought it was laughable that Crimea would even be in contention to be Russia's. The fact, regardless of the fact that they've annexed it, that Russian wine is from there, that the Russian Navy was headquartered from there. I mean, a lot of different aspects and elements to this. Is part of this also the West's fault for our inability to give any concessions to Putin through this process?
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair analysis of it. Look, I think it's less of a fair analysis about the official class of negotiator. I think actually, while they probably won't want to tell you this, most things are on the table to bring that war to an end. And we discussed in the last segment, what is on the table in terms of war making to perhaps bring Putin to the table. But also, you're right to point out different areas of what were historically both Ukraine and Russia over the last several decades being up for negotiation. The problem is not that. The problem is exactly of which you speak. It's the academic class, it's the op-ed writers, it's the media class. And what the Russian apparatus and the Russian elites see day after day is all of this stuff peddled out there to say, even if you do try and come to the table, we're not going to let you have this, that, and the other anyway. We don't recognize you. We don't recognize Putin as the leader. And actually, none of that is coming out of officialdom. It's all coming out of, the New York Times and the Washington Post and these guys. And, that's not to say that they can't have their opinions on such things. But you have to understand, media works a very different way in somewhere like Russia than it does in Midtown Manhattan. For a major publication that is seen as, all the news that's fit to print in Russia to be publishing things like that would almost have to get a tacit wink and a nod from the establishment to allow that to happen. And a lot of them interpret what the media class and the academic class and the think tank class in the United States as saying is with a nudge and a wink from officialdom. And that is simply not the case. You can listen to all manner of podcasts and shows, and as I do, by the way, from across the liberal elite sphere, because I love to know what they're saying. It's usually, opinion-driven nonsense. And you could be mistaken into thinking that this was the view of the Pentagon, or this is the view of the Department of State, because they say, well, of course, I've spoken to some sources. Turns out some source was, an intern who worked in a subsidiary department at state, 1,500 miles away somewhere, trying to clout chase or get their opinion taken seriously. Coming back to the point about that, look. The Russian mentality, as we know, for hundreds of years, has geared towards the idea of suffering, and especially suffering for your nation, for your compatriots. This isn't new to them. they don't have a feeling like we do of necessarily like war weariness like we do. But they also don't have democratic institutions like we do. They don't have their voices represented at every level of government, as we're supposed to, by the way. They don't have their voices represented in their media class, as we're supposed to, by the way. And so for them, there's this giant chasm between the leadership right now, which are, I won't say they're not searching for a way out, but they're searching for a way out that saves them face, and public will, which is really not on the side of continuing this conflict.
Check out thenationalpulse.com. Raheem, thank you so much. Great analysis as always. I want to hear from you. freedom@charliekirk.com. If this war is ongoing, do you support sending more money and arms to Ukraine? See you guys tomorrow.